You thought stepping out was the grown-up choice. Pack a bag, clear the tension, give everyone space. But the second you pulled that front door shut, the game shifted. In family court, the parent who stays is the parent who looks stable. The one who leaves, no matter the reason, gets framed as the one who abandoned ship. And while you're setting up on a friend's couch or signing a lease you never budgeted for, she's turning the house into a home base, stacking evidence that the kids, the routine, and even the bills all function just fine without you. By the time you realize what you handed over, custody leverage, asset control, the story itself, you're already fighting uphill. Moving out didn't defuse the conflict. It surrendered the battlefield. Courts crave stability, and the simplest way to define stable is an address that hasn't changed. The moment you move out, you hand her that badge. Now she's the resident parent, the one keeping the lights on and the homework flowing while you're mailing keys back or asking permission to grab your stuff. Judges see a fixed home and think security. They see your new apartment and call it transition. That single difference frames every custody discussion that follows. Suddenly, weekend visits feel reasonable. Midweek dinners look like a stretch, and her lawyer can say, without lying, that the children have already adjusted to life in one household, hers. You didn't just give up a bed. You gave up the narrative of being a daily presence, and the court will use that snapshot as its starting point for what best interests look like. When you carry that suitcase to the car, you're not just leaving a house. You're handing her a storyline, and family court loves a clear narrative. She doesn't have to call you irresponsible outright. She just has to repeat a few simple facts. He left first. The kids were confused. I stayed to keep things steady. Those 3 sentences plant the seed that you walked away from the real work of family life. Even if you're the one paying the bills, coaching soccer, making midnight pharmacy runs, none of that matters once the visual shifts. Judges, mediators, even friends start to picture her anchoring the household while you orbit as a visitor. And the longer you're gone, the deeper the abandonment image sinks in. Each missed bedtime, because getting across town on a weeknight is now a logistical puzzle, becomes silent evidence that you're the parent who pops in, not the parent who's present. She'll file temporary orders citing continuity and minimal disruption, and suddenly your previous dedication gets recast as weekend availability. Even your own attempts at cooperation can backfire. Agree to give her more overnights for now, and that concession morphs into a pattern the court is reluctant to disturb. Worse, every dollar you still pour into the mortgage or groceries is invisible compared to the optics of who tucks the kids in under the shared roof. By the time you explain that you left to de-escalate conflict, the storyline is already locked. She stayed, you strayed, and the legal machinery will churn forward, assuming the children's stability depends on her, while your role is negotiated down to what can be squeezed around an abandoned address. The shock comes a few weeks later when a slim envelope appears, temporary order of custody and support. Inside is the routine the court now expects everyone to follow until final judgment. Your address is listed as non-residential parent. Your parenting time, alternating weekends, and maybe a midweek dinner, subject to the children's activities. The house you're still paying for, awarded to her for the stability of the minor children. It feels provisional, but here's the brutal secret. Courts hate to undo what already seems to work. The judge doesn't have time to micromanage every family, so the first schedule that doesn't cause chaos becomes the default. When you moved out, you made it easy for her attorney to argue that the kids are thriving. Same bedrooms, same school bus, same nightly routine, while you're building a new household on the fly. The court stamps the temporary plan, and from that moment forward, you're fighting gravity. Every hearing, her lawyer repeats the magic words, status quo. If you ask for equal time, she counters with why disrupt a stable arrangement? If you mention how you left to calm tensions, she says he chose to establish a separate residence. Meanwhile, your rent drains your savings, and the mortgage you still cover counts as shelter provided for the custodial parent, bolstering her claim that you can afford higher support. Even the temporary child support figure, calculated while you're juggling 2 housing costs, sets a benchmark the final order rarely lowers. You scramble for extra overtime to stay afloat. And those longer work hours become Exhibit A for why the children belong with a parent whose schedule best aligns with their needs. What was meant to give everyone breathing room has fast-forwarded into a legal mold. She's the anchor, you're the visitor, and the court will only shift that mold if you can prove the current plan is harmful, never simply because it's unfair. The financial strain kicks in faster than the loneliness. You're signing 2 rent checks, one to keep a roof over your own head, another to keep the marital mortgage current so the bank doesn't come calling. Add utilities, movers' fees, new furniture for a half-empty apartment, and suddenly your monthly burn rate has doubled while your income hasn't budged. Meanwhile, she's living in a house that's fully furnished with assets you both bought, under a roof you're still helping to pay for, and presenting that stability in every affidavit her lawyer files. Now negotiations begin, and you're the one sweating deadlines. Mediation gets postponed. That's another month of double housing payments. Discovery drags on. More nights lying awake, doing mental math on when your credit card will max out. Her attorney knows it too. They can afford to slow-roll disclosures, demand extra documents, reschedule settlement conferences. Every delay squeezes you harder while she stays relatively insulated by the mortgage you're covering. When the first real settlement offer lands on the table, thinner slice of equity, higher support number, limited holidays, you hear the calculator in your head, not your pride. You start weighing dollars against principles. Fight for a fair split and risk another 6 months of bleeding cash, or sign an uneven deal just to stop the hemorrhage. That desperation shows in every negotiation session. Mediators sense it, her lawyer exploits it, and even your own counsel cautions you about litigation fatigue. By moving out too early, you turned your bank account into a countdown clock, and everyone across the table hears the ticking louder than your arguments for fairness. While you're juggling rent and mortgage, another battle is unfolding inside the house you left. The battle for information. Tax returns, medical records, school notices, utility bills, bank statements, even the kids' report cards all land at the marital address. With you gone, she opens the mail, schemes the contents, and decides what gets shared. Need last year's W-2 for financial disclosure? She can't find it. Ask for the daycare receipts that prove you already cover half the expenses. They must be packed somewhere. In family court, documentation is ammunition. Whoever controls the paper trail controls the story. She hands her attorney neatly labeled folders while you scramble to request duplicates from banks and employers, paying rush fees and losing weeks in the process. Every missing statement paints you as disorganized, or worse, evasive. And because you're no longer on site, you miss the subtle day-to-day evidence that could help your case. Who really packs lunches? Who signs permission slips? How many nights you use to bathe the kids? She curates the narrative unchallenged, snapping photos of herself, helping with homework while your old hockey practice photos sit unseen on a hard drive. By the time depositions start, her version of history is printed, stapled, and paginated, while your rebuttals hinge on delayed records and hazy recollections. Judges lean heavily on paperwork. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. By moving out early, you surrendered the filing cabinet, literally and figuratively, giving her the power to decide which facts exist and which conveniently disappear. The legal setbacks hurt, but it's the slow erosion of everyday presence that cuts deepest. And ironically, it's that erosion the court will later measure. The first week you crash on a buddy's couch, the kids FaceTime after dinner. By week 3, calls come every other night because homework runs late. A month in, they'd rather show you their projects over text than interrupt the Netflix show they now watch with mom at the usual bedtime you once enforced. None of this feels dramatic. It's quiet, incremental, the natural drift of routines filling in the space where you used to stand. But family court quantifies best interests in snapshots of consistency. When the evaluator interviews your son 6 months from now, and he says, "I see dad on weekends, we usually go out," that's recorded as the new normal, a normalized distance that began the moment you loaded boxes into your trunk. Meanwhile, your ex documents every missed-out meeting you couldn't attend because the drive across town collided with traffic or your overtime shift. She logs each doctor appointment you weren't available for, even though you only learned about it afterward. These small absences, born for geography you created by leaving early, turn to bullet points her attorney weaves into a theme. Dad's involved, but mom is the daily anchor. Judges love anchors. They equate them with security, predictability, emotional safety. So when you finally request a 50-50 schedule, the court doesn't see a return to your former role. It sees an upheaval of the stability the children have already adapted to. The tragedy? That adaptation started as a sacrifice you made in good faith to defuse conflict, to protect the kids from arguments. Yet in the legal ledger, it converts into evidence that your constant presence isn't essential. Space you gave for peace becomes the very metric used to measure your necessity. By the time you realize the emotional gap has calcified into a legal one, the kids, the court, and even your own calendar have adjusted to a version of fatherhood that occupies weekends and occasional calls. Nothing more. The longer you operate from the outside, the harsher the spotlight on every decision you make, because now each choice is filtered through the lens of a non-custodial parent. Need to pick up an extra shift because the double housing costs are crushing you? Her side frames it as proof you value work over time with the kids. Start dating someone new? They'll argue it's destabilizing, even if she introduced the children to her boyfriend weeks earlier. Try to enforce your scheduled parenting time? Any hint of frustration gets labeled aggressive, a word that sticks fast in custody reports. Leaving the house early didn't just rearrange bedrooms. It inverted the presumption of reasonableness. Every action you take now arrives in court already tilted against you. She hosts sleepovers in the family living room. Normal childhood fun. You try the same in your smaller apartment. Unsafe, inadequate space. She redecorates the kids' rooms. Nurturing environment. You rearrange yours to add bunk beds. Disruptive change. The standard isn't objective. It's weighted by who's presumed primary. And because you forfeited that title the day you moved out, you're measured against an ideal you can't match within the limits of weekend fatherhood. Even small wins, like securing an extra overnight, come with hidden costs. Bigger child support calculations because now your percentage of overnights officially increased, but your rent and commute haven't shrunk. The system congratulates itself on balance while your budget screams. All because you left too soon, ceding not just square footage, but the baseline of what the court now calls normal. Walking out felt like the mature move, an act of peace, a temporary pause. But in family law, timing is everything, and the first one to vacate the home rarely writes the ending. By stepping outside the front door, you surrendered the address that defines stability, gifted her a ready-made abandonment narrative, allowed temporary orders to harden into default law, doubled your housing costs until negotiation fatigue set in, and forfeited the documents that shaped the court's memory. You didn't just relocate. You relinquished the evidence of everyday fatherhood, bedtime routines, scrape-knee band-aids, missed bus notes that judges use to quantify best interests. With each week away, emotional distance calcified into legal distance, shrinking your role from full-time parent to convenient visitor. Financial pressure sharpened her lawyer's strategy. Stall, delay, let your wallet beg for closure. And every choice you made under that pressure, overtime shifts, smaller living space, the occasional frustrated text, was recast as proof that the children already orbited her stability, not your effort. By the time you realized the battlefield was paperwork, not politeness, the court had accepted the story written in your absence. Dad left first. Mom held the fort. So before you grab a suitcase to cool off, pause. Document everything. Consult counsel. If safety isn't an issue, stay until a temporary plan is on record that protects custody, finances, and access to documents. Insist on written parenting schedules, shared bills, equitable possession of records before anyone changes addresses. The calm exit you plan today can become the legal climb you fight for years. Leaving isn't weakness, but leaving without a strategy hands her the house, the narrative, and ultimately the power